let me start. I will do just a very short, brief introduction. Aubrey and David, co-founders of Child of the Redwoods. You can see their website. I will write it in the chat immediately when they start talking. I'm sure many of you know them, and I will give them the space to introduce themselves and to start this amazing topic that everyone is talking about, everyone is asking about screens and when is the right time to give my child a screen. Is it okay to give my child a phone to play a game? Is it okay to give my child, I don't know, a Netflix series, whatever that is? Let's start with the topic. Aubrey and David, welcome and thank you for accepting to be one of our speakers at one of these live talks that we do twice a month.
It's our pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting us. Yeah.
We are actually very excited to talk about technology and screen time with you here today. Super common concerns. So if you have arrived, with lots of worries, just know that that is normal. Let me give you a little introduction to who we are. My name is Aubrey Hargis. I am a lifelong Montessorian. I grew up in Montessori, went to Montessori schools. My mother was a Montessori teacher in primary. I then went on to get my master's in curriculum and instruction and to become both a public school teacher, mostly teaching kindergarten for quite a while, and I also taught in Montessori private schools. I ended my time in Montessori schools teaching toddlers in the Montessori toddler classroom. And from then, I started to homeschool my own children with the Montessori method at home. So that's a little bit of my background personally. And would you like to share some of yours?
Yeah, my name is David Hargis. I'm Aubrey's husband. We've been married for about 25 plus years at this point, and we are the co-founders of Child of the Redwoods. My background is also in education. I've worked in education for about 3 decades. I started out teaching high school history, social sciences, things like that here in the US, and then moved into educational technology. I was an early worker in those areas, both as a classroom teacher and then in both the public sector and in the private sector, and have built all kinds of apps and things for kids and adult learners both. When we started Child of the Redwoods, like our vision was to use technology in a helpful way to bring Montessori to more people and try and eliminate as many barriers as possible. So trying to understand what technology can do, which is really powerful, but also respecting the role of non-technological experiences. So we don't produce apps or things like that for kids to use. And we'll talk more about that in a
That's
minute.
a good point to bring up. Just right off the bat, from the groundwork of Montessori, our perspective really is going to be that those concrete and hands-on experiences cannot be replaced, okay? And that said, if you're in a place where you feel like technology is suddenly taking over your home, now we have AI integrated suddenly into every single experience, it seems, that we're interacting with as adults, offering to do things for us in all these different ways. Some of it's great, some of it's not so great. But if you are feeling that stress, and when you have tried to give your child a little bit of screen time, maybe with your phone or with the TV or with an iPad, just know that you're not alone in the struggle of it, okay? These new forms of technology that we are introducing to ourselves and our human culture, and that we are now creating and giving to our children, these are all brand new. And so I want to set us up with this expectation that while we're here to talk to you about the Montessori perspective and how to use the Montessori method to your advantage to help you know when something is good for your child or when you're on the wrong track, like both of those things can be used with the Montessori method. We can use it in order to observe that this issue, like no one has solved this issue of what to do with screen time or technology. Even the psychologists and pediatricians, you may have noticed, we've noticed, at least as experienced parents with now teenagers at home, that over the years, what they recommend, what the experts recommend as being good for kids has changed.
Totally.
You know, from year to year, different recommendations are being made based on, just what's available now.
Who's funding the research, the point of view that they're trying to convey. It's messy.
Yeah. Now, previously, when speaking from parents who our first was born in 2007, which was the year the iPhone came out, I believe, or the year after. I know that was like the year that David got an iPhone. I didn't yet have one. And so like none of this existed. And then all of a sudden, now we have reached the point where there is just this expectation that if you are raising a young child, you're going to have technology in your home and be using it with them. It's just part of the standard. And kids in schools are being issued tablets and laptops as part of the regular experience. So even if you just look at just the small span of time, which for our kids is about 2 decades almost, as our oldest has just turned 18, even just in his lifespan as a young child, at first, when all of these tablets and screens came out for kids, aside from your regular family TV, the expectation would be that you weren't going to give them to your kids and that you should have no screen time at all. And for a long time, the experts were saying no screen time is the best amount of screen time. Like it's all bad and you shouldn't give your kid any. But as we went through our years of parenting, we realized that that is setting parents up for an almost impossible standard to follow. So we're going to talk about that today in this session. And just to emphasize, like, this is a cultural experience that we are sharing together that is evolving through time.
Yeah, let's jump into this topic, and I can't wait to hear your questions. I love seeing that we have this hugely diverse group in terms of their kids' age and your backgrounds and your places on this beautiful world. So I'd love to hear your perspective. Let's start with the basics, which you've already said, that technology is everywhere, at least in our world, right? So I can't speak for every corner of the earth, but I will tell you that in the US and throughout Europe, in my experience, and India, when I would travel through India and all over Asia and so forth, like it's just everywhere. It's almost impossible to escape it. It's not like TV, right? So you could have had a TV. I know this will be super dated, but for those of us who grew up in an era where TV was everything, and as parents, when we were young, thinking about how we were going to parent, our number one concern for media was the TV. And our answer was, we're going to have a TV in the living room and we'll watch stuff together and that'll be it. And we won't have TVs in their bedrooms and so forth or whatever. And like, we will consume media together. And then they invented these tablets and screens and googogs, and the internet got transformed into this sort of personal delivery device that is watching your every move and sniffing out all your data in order to like pull you back into it. And they spent billions of dollars to figure all that out. And then they spent billions of dollars to convince everybody that they needed to live with their technology. And then they actually designed the world so that you can't live without it unless you want to live kind of off grid, something like that. But if you are living in an average world, what do you use technology to do? Figure out when the bus is coming, pay your taxes, answer work emails or personal emails, communicate with your child's school, pay your electric bill, check your bank. Like it's just everywhere. And that's not even all the frivolous stuff we do. Like I want to play my video game and I want to do crossword puzzles on the New York Times and I use an app, like all that other stuff, or I'm watching videos. Like we have a TV, but the TV is hooked to the internet. The TV is just a big monitor for the internet. It's just everywhere. And not only is there a cultural expectation in the modern world that we will live by technology, you would have to go out of your way to stay outside of technology. Now, the challenge is that those technologies, they're not good in all ways. And as we have little guys, especially, we're faced with this question of how much do we introduce? Like, how pure can we keep them? How much outside of the realm of this omnipresent thing called technology can we keep them in for how long? Because at some point it's inevitable. They're going, unless again, you're going to live kind of an off-grid sort of way, you could have very strict rules. It is possible, but for most people, it's not realistic. And honestly, our advice would be it's not healthy. We actually, what we want to do is not to resist the technology. What we want to do is teach our children to consume it in a powerful, individual, controlled way. They are in charge. And just like anything else that we want to teach a child, whether it's reading, math, science, whatever, learning to interact with technology and be smart about technology is an imperative. And so keeping kids away from it forever is not the solution. The solution is kind of accepting like the world that we live in is based around the internet-based technologies. We can't do anything about it unless we want to take a kind of extreme action. So what are we going to do instead? We're going to empower our children to take control of their lives and be in charge and not susceptible to as much as possible to all the things around us that are telling us like consume, 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 consume.
Yeah, I know you have more to talk about here, but I also want to emphasize our own parenting experience. I remember being a parent of young children and being flooded on the young internet and in groups, especially social media as it became new, with a lot of fear mongering about screen time addiction and the negative effects that children can experience being exposed to screens. Now, for full disclosure, we weren't always on the same page here.
Totally.
David grew up in a household that was full of TV watching, and your parents kind of leaned into watching all those old shows with you, and you had a TV in your bedroom. It was like a normal part of your life to watch a lot of TV.
My father worked at a local television station.
Yes.
And so it was literally our bread and butter.
That's right. So yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. I wasn't thinking about that at the time that I married you and we were going through these initial discussions about TV and how much is too much. But yeah, that was David's reality. And my reality was my TV experience as a child was very, very controlled. I was allowed to watch Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers, and that was it for all of my young childhood. My parents were just very, very cautious about media exposure with me. And my mother was a Montessori school teacher, so that was kind of my perspective growing up. And so as we both tried to navigate the new technologies that were appearing at the time, it required us, to be quite frank with you, to have a lot of conversations about this. And I know that there are some of you out there, I'm just want to say this because I know some of you are out there whose spouses or partners do not agree with your Montessori perspective right now. And I want to share from my experience that it took years for David and I to be on the same page about technology. And it's not that I was right and he was wrong and he came over to my Montessori side. It wasn't like that. No, we had to work through it with conversations with each new piece of technology that entered our home. We had to talk about it, to research it, to try to resist. And for my part, it meant that I had to resist the fear mongering that was out there in the news. And so I consciously tried to focus more on our family experiences and what was happening with our technology that we had in our home, and to try to reduce my exposure to all of the articles about the negativity about technology. So that is something that you might consider if you are finding yourself on high anxiety, like many, many parents of toddlers who are specifically in the Montessori community. If you're really, really worried about the effect of screen time on your children, My first advice to you is try to reduce the exposure that you're having to the negativity about it. Okay.
Yeah. So there's some really great questions that are popping up, and I'm seeing things like how much, uh, what's the okay amount of TV for a 4-year-old? How do I have a screen time that works for all age groups? They have a 12, 9.5, and 5. I'm not going to give you I'm going to give you the sad answer, which is there's no correct standard.
Yep.
It is, in our opinion, some people will say no screen time. We don't agree with that because I don't think it sets a realistic expectation for you and your child. And you're not teaching your child to be a good consumer and user of media, right? We used to have a concept of media literacy that we've sort of lost, and it's too bad because it's so important as it goes with civics and other sorts of concepts that need to be taught. So the truth of the matter is the hard answer is you have to determine yourself what the right amount is. Now, for a 4-year-old, I would say not very much TV would be the best choice,
Or screen time.
or screen time in general, because well, let's get into this. Like, what are the rules that you would follow in order to know what's the right limit for you? The first one is you have to be intentional. What is your purpose for using the technology? If you think the technology is going to teach something, you need to erase that from your brain right now. It's probably not. Apps don't teach people things. TV shows don't teach people things. People learn by doing. So they can see a habit on TV and they go act it out. And if they act it out again and again, it can create a neural pathway that leads to a habit, right? Exposure. Let's take a positive example. So I got my kid, they're playing an app-based game where they're pointing at colors on a screen like, oh, here's the red one, here's the blue one, here's the green one. It's a game. Like, if you really want your child to learn colors, they need to physically manipulate the world, because if they're young enough to be learning their colors, they're in the period of sensorial learning. You've depleted almost all of the sensorial inputs by putting them in front of a screen, right? All they have is maybe the tactile sense of touch, maybe an auditory sound. It's probably yelling at them saying, you did it, you didn't do it, right? So it's got their attention because anything that yells at you will get your attention. But if you really want them to learn, they need to have the crayons or the colored pencils. They should have the color tablets. They should be coloring in books. They should be smelling the wax from the crayon. They should be feeling the paper itself. They should be feeling the pencil in their hand as their crayon in their hand. As they're doing it, they need to engage as many of their senses as they can. And no TV or screen of any type is going to do that. If you have a 4-year-old and you want them to consume some media, watch it with them, I would say, and limit it, because it's just not a super healthy food for them to consume. And set your expectation realistically. Like, what are they going to get out of there? They're going to get out of it a passage of time. Like, they're going to get cultural awareness. They're going to know who Coco Melon is or something, or Bluey, right? They're going to know what those things are. But are they going to learn like moral lessons? No, they're going to learn moral lessons from you, the parent, and how you're interacting with them and how they see you interact with your spouse and your other children and so forth.
Okay, so let's talk about the Montessori perspective on these apps or these technological tools, because what I want you to do is to start thinking of them as tools rather than thinking of it as a screen. Okay, so anything that's on your tablet or your phone or your laptop, these are tools that you're going to use in your real world, in your real life, as it is useful to you. So looking from the perspective of the Montessori method at these apps, here is what I can tell you. I can tell you that most of the apps that they make on tablets, and I have previewed many, many, many of them, they are not designed for the development of children. They're not.
Yeah.
Okay, what are they designed for? Friends. They are designed to make money. So almost every app that you're going to encounter is going to have some kind of financial backing behind it. And behind that app, whoever is making money off of that app, it's about numbers for them. It's about the numbers of people who are downloading it and how much time they spend on it. And most of the free apps in particular that are marketed for both adults and children are going to have advertisements in them.
Yes.
Right, that your child is going to have to click through in order to get to the educational part. So
they're going to complete a game, like drag the circle to the circle shape. Okay, now watch an ad. Now you get to drag this triangle to the triangle shape, whatever, something like that. That's the entirety of how they're designed.
Right.